let's talk about first-round running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who, there's a lot of talk about should you draft a running back in the first round or should you not draft a running back in the first round, which I think is an interesting topic of discussion. One of the times that I've said I'm more okay, just if you don't know me at all, I've typically been in the camp of you should not draft a running back in the first round. However, I understand that plenty of people disagree. And one of the areas I've said it kind of makes sense is if you're in a championship window, in the middle of a championship window, and want to maximize that window for as long as possible, maybe taking a draft pick that's not necessarily the best move in the long term, but could be good in the short term, could be a good strategy. That's kind of where the Chiefs were at, right? They just came off of winning a Super Bowl. They, had a quarterback who's great, who's still on a rookie deal. So maximizing that window and then maybe retooling a bit after the rookie contract ends made some sense. It's the situation where if you were to craft a perfect scenario of when you should draft a running back in the first round, this was that scenario. But of course, Edwards-Helaire has yet to live up to the hype of being a first-round pick, so let's talk about what's gone wrong so far in his career. Well, first, we obviously have to watch some LSU tape of what got him drafted in the first place. I was looking at some highlights of his, looking at the upside that he had, and the reality is, a lot of the highlights, I really do feel like watching Clyde Edwards-Helaire, to me, just really shows why, so much of a running back's hype can often be attributed to the offensive line. I mean, just watch this play. Watch how, Edwards-Helaire is going to get the ball. He just basically follows the hole and is completely untouched at this point. I mean, again, you could say he accelerated relatively well, but this wasn't insanely great acceleration or anything like that. Also, I did have to pause it for a point just because of copyright reasons. I can't play more than so much time in a row of broadcast footage or it'll get claimed. But yeah, that's all that was happening there. But yeah, I mean, that's really the reality is for Edwards-Helaire. This, to me, was a lot of his highlights were just him. And even in the NFL, when he's had highlights, it's been a lot of that. Which, listen, I want to be clear, there absolutely is value in a running back who can simply just run through the hole that's presented in front of him. That there is value in that, but how much value is there in that? And the reality is, a lot of guys at the NFL level can accomplish that. And now, to give Edwards-Helaire some credit, I would like to argue that he didn't only make stuff like that happen. I mean, he was able to, at times do a good job of making things easier for him. And when he was maybe in bad situations, still finding a way to get out of those bad situations. I think that that's fair. Something like this. So it's going to be a 3rd down and 1 situation near the end zone. And this is definitely where I would say Edwards-Helaire thrived in LSU. And this is probably his biggest positive attribute when he got drafted. Look at how when this play begins, you're going to see that right here. Okay, there's a little bit of trouble. Defender who's trying to tackle him. Now, Edwards-Helaire is probably going to get the first down here, I would assume. But how much more yards are you going to get? Well, for a lesser back, maybe not that many, but Edwards-Helaire is going to do a good job here. Watch how he is able to sidestep, and he's actually going to be able to get into the end zone for a touchdown. That's probably one of the things that he was best at, was that shiftiness. And again, it was legitimately good and a positive trait. Like, I think that seeing value in someone like Clyde Edwards-Helaire out of college was, true. Like, he was a valuable prospect. Like, that isn't crazy at all to say. But now let's watch some NFL tape, because the reality is, you just don't always get those opportunities that you get in college that you in the NFL. In fact, you rarely get those opportunities. The holes are a lot smaller, a lot less frequently do you get those giant holes to run through. And not to mention the defenders are a lot better. So, some of these running backs that kind of get by off of being able to make guys miss in the NFL, sometimes those are the guys who end up being bust because they can't make the guys miss in the NFL as frequently, and they don't necessarily have the other traits to fall back on, like someone like Edwards-Helaire. Because, watch what's going to happen on this play. So you see him move up, and okay, there was a missed block on this play, right? Right there, there's definitely a situation where for Edwards-Helaire, he is in trouble through no fault of his own. So, okay, you're in trouble right here, but that's, fine, right? You're a first-round running back. You can make stuff happen. Well, maybe if this was a college defensive player, you'd be able to. However, here in the NFL, he is not able to. And to be clear, I'm not saying he should have found a way to get out of that situation. In fact, I'm saying the opposite. I don't think any running back really gets out of that situation. Maybe Derrick Henry, but honestly, I don't think Derrick Henry does either. Like, I don't think running backs are able to consistently get out of situations when there's a defender right on them. You do it every now and then, and those always make the highlight reels, but it's very rare for something like that to happen. And in college level, you can do that a lot more consistently. So when those opportunities go away, and that was a big part of what made Edwards-Helaire special in the running game, well then, that's an issue. And I'll go over here. I'll say, one positive thing about Edwards-Helaire is you still do see him, when plays are well blocked, be able to get through the gaps. Like, he really does, for the most part, do his job and get the yards that are presented in front of him. Watch how on this play, that's basically exactly what's going to happen. There's a window, and he's able to get through the window. But again, how many running backs get through this window? The answer is most of them, and it's just a great example, really, of why, saying running backs don't matter isn't true, but saying running backs are overrated is true, because a lot of people will look at the yards per carry and think the running back has the majority of why that's the case. But the reality is, usually yards per carry is only a good stat for running backs if you're comparing different running backs in the same system. If you're comparing running backs from different systems, it's completely different and even has way more variance than even like a passer rating does for quarterbacks. It's so dependent on the talent you have around you. So for Edwards-Helaire, there still is value in someone like him. He gets the yards that are presented in front of him, and that's good. But there was never really going to be a scenario where he would live up to the first round potential. Again, worth mentioning, part of what they liked about him too was what he can do in the receiving game, but the receiving game very similar to the running game. There's only so much you can typically do in that spot as a wide receiver, unless it's one of those very unique scenarios where you have like Le'Veon Bell, who legitimately would have been a good wide receiver had that been the position he played, or like Christian McCaffrey is another guy where like those guys would legitimately just go out and play receiver. Like, unless you're someone like that, the value between an elite receiving back and a bad receiving back is not zero, but definitely, as long as you can just get an okay guy in that spot, you're typically going to be fine, and there's just only so much value in that. So for Edwards-Helaire, it's really less about him not living up to the college hype or not being the player he was in college. He really still is the player he was in college. There's just only so much value that player actually brings to the table in an NFL uniform. So that's, to me, why I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire ended up being a bust, if you want to call him that. Hey, guys, Super Bowl champion. I don't know if he's a total, you could say he's not a total bust because of that or whatever, but why maybe he hasn't lived up to being a first round talent so far is because, in my opinion, just there's not going to be a situation in the NFL like there was in college at LSU. At least that's kind of how I view it. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. What are your thoughts on Edwards-Helaire? Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.